Put the movies that you're going to join right on your desktop. Launch the movie application, which is iMovie. Takes a while to launch. Minimize this or make this screen small enough that you can select the movies that you want and just drag them right here. That's the simplest for sure. Okay, so each of the movies is in this selection area. From here, you simply drag them down below and it'll tell you how long each one is right here. So I've got Attack of the Green Monster, I've got whatever this one is, and I've got this one. So up here, it's not actually in the movie, it's just ready to select. Once you've selected it, notice this orange line. That means each of these three movies appears down here. You can make this lower part smaller or larger depending on if you're going to edit. So the most basic thing here, I've got all three of these movies joined together and they're 47 seconds long. Okay? So if I wanted to edit this first one, this is the viewing area. So let's say I wanted to make this first part just a little bit shorter. What I can take here is select this clipping, stretch it out so I can see all the frames, and from here, this is not the actual number of frames, but it's a shrunken amount. But let's say I wanted it to be half as long. I can select this, I go to Modify, Split Clip, and then I can just delete that first part. That's the simplest way to get rid of anything that you don't want, is to simply select the area that you don't want, split the clip, and if it were in the middle, split it twice, and then delete. So that's the simplest way to edit. There are other ways of dragging, but I find it easiest to use the split clip. Okay, so I can split this if I want. If I want a transition between the end of this movie, the beginning of the next, I go to Transitions. It shows all the different samples. And again, when I'm doing something like transitions, this is handy to get to know. You either shrink or expand the individual movies depending on what you want to do with them. If all I'm doing is adding a transition, I just drag in the transition that I want. Anytime I want to preview, I simply click somewhere in the movie and then click up here and it shows what's going to happen. So I'm going to see that transition. And play the next one. Okay, so we've covered getting the movies into the viewer, bringing them down here, how to clip them if we need to. Let's say we have a nice title on this movie, but we would like to have a title on this movie. It's only 16 seconds long. So I'm going to go to the beginning of that movie. And this little thing right here shows where you are. Beginning of the movie, and I'm going to go to titles. There are lots of different titles. You pick the one that you want. So let's say I want this one to be this title right here. So I drag the title down. By default, it has a certain length. And we can stretch this out and see it's 4 seconds long by default. So I double click on the title right here. I'm going to call it Monsters. And I think this is by Adam. I'm not sure, but I can type that in. Now the thing you need to remember after you've done this is click this little check mark. Otherwise it doesn't always remember. So I've added a title now. If I wanted it longer, I can simply drag it longer. If I wanted it shorter, I can simply drag it shorter. So I've got a title. Let's see if for this last one here, we might also want another title. And again, I'm going to use the same one. And again, I'm going to double click. I'm going to call it Fight Scene. And I don't really know why that switched colors. It's something funny. Let's say, but we might as well change colors here. Fight Scene. And I don't want the subtitle this time, so I just delete it. And again, once I've made a title, check right here. So, I've done most of the basic things that I could do. There are a few other things you can add, but frankly I don't use these much. The backgrounds I don't use. If you wanted to add audio, you can add audio to any of these. You can add sound effects. Let's go ahead and add a sound effect here to this last one, to the fight scene. So, fight scene, and let's get, we don't want theme music, we want booms. Let's have some booms. Double click. So if I like that sound, I just take that sound and drag it down here, and the sound file will show up. I can shorten it a little bit. Oops, I'm doing that wrong. Shorten it like this, and let's see what our boom does. So there's lots of different sounds. They're grouped into all of these different things. Foley is your recognizable sound effect. So there's a lot of different sounds you can add. Notice that a sound file shows up in green, and there are ways to make it louder or quieter, and we can get into that in another video. So I think we've looked at all the basics. We've done transitions, titles, adding audio, adding our video, and when we want to export it, we come up here to this button right here, Share, Export to File, name it, Sample Movie. This is using iMovie. Click Next. And again, you can get into that other detail. Sample movie, save it. This is fairly short. It's not going to take too long to render, and you'll see the status right here. Okay, it's going to tell me that it's done. I'm going to close this. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to go to my Finder, to my movies, and I have a huge number of movies on here, so I'm going to sort by date modified. And there's my sample movie. I can click it, and I can watch it. Now, once you've watched it, I have found over quite a few years of doing this that I really don't like the way iMovie tries to save things. There are things like projects, there's all kinds of tricky things over here, and frankly it just gets confusing. I like to store my movies the way I want to store them. So once you're finished and you know for a fact that's all you want, you're going to select everything at the bottom and Control, or actually just Delete key. Then you're going to select everything at the top and go to File, Delete Media from Event, Delete. This is going to bring you back to square one so that next time around you've just got an empty iMovie. This is my personal taste. You can experiment with doing it some other way, but this works very well